Ocean Story is with you, and I have new stories that touch me. My mom left me and my sister when I was 14, and my sister Eleanor was 12. My dad was very upset by this and raised us on his own for a long time. Eleanor and I were more or less adults, so my dad didn't worry too much about us. My mom and dad decided to get a divorce after she flew to another country for 3 months to take a job course. That's where my mom met a guy named Grayson. My mom fell in love with him very quickly and forgot that she had her own family with 2 children. When my mom came back, she immediately became very cold to my dad. In the next 6 months, my mom filed for divorce. She moved to live with Grayson, who lived on the other side of town. It turned out that Grayson had children of his own. My mom deliberately left us for a better guy. Even though Grayson had children of his own, he had 2 little boys, 12 and 9 years old. My younger sister cried for a very long time and couldn't believe that our mother had decided to leave us. It was especially difficult for me to go through this period. Some of my classmates learned that my mother had left our family. Children teased me and tried to make me an orphan in their jokes every time. My father often went to school to settle these issues. My desire to go to school was getting less every day. 2 years after my mom left us, I got used to the fact that no one would listen to my teenage stories, and I could only share something with a few of my friends. My dad didn't really understand all my female issues. When I was 15, one day, my mom came to our house. She almost never came to our house and was not interested in our life, so I was a little surprised to see her. My mom brought her 2 new sons, Levi, the older one, and Isaac, the younger one. My dad didn't want to sit with them, but when my mom told me what happened, my dad's expression changed and he agreed to stay with them. It was only in the evening that I learned that Grayson had died on the construction site. He worked as a construction worker all the time. I never asked how he died, but my dad said it happened very quickly and no one had time to do anything. I have never seen my mother so upset. Levi and Isaac were almost speechless when they learned that their father had passed away. It was a huge event that everyone knew about, even though I subconsciously hated Grayson for stealing my mom. But Grayson was not a bad man and always took care of his family. When Grayson's funeral was held, I even felt very sorry for him. My mom was recovering from this event for a very long time because she and Grayson were married for a very short time. 3 months after they came back from their honeymoon, Grayson passed away. My mom was left with custody of Grayson's children, although Grayson's sister would come over sometimes to look after Levi and Isaac. This could not replace their real dad. I felt very bad when my mom left for another man. I cannot understand what people feel when someone close to them dies. 6 months passed and everyone got used to what happened. My mom started asking my dad to sit with Levi and Isaac from time to time. She argued that they were not yet big enough and needed their dad. My dad almost never agreed and asked his ex to find someone else. Because of this approach, many of our relatives began to judge my dad and say that he was a heartless bastard. The whole situation became much worse between my dad and my mom. When it was Thanksgiving, my dad's uncle was having dinner at his house. Gabriel invited my family and many other relatives. When we arrived at the party, I saw Levi and Isaac at the table. My attitude toward them was not bad, but I would not say that I loved them. My sister is a little younger than me. Eleanor did not think there were other people's children, so she was able to find a common language with them. My dad came in and was shocked that Gabriel had invited my mom to the party as well. I was a little happy to see my mom because I hadn't seen her for a few months. My dad almost left, but Gabriel was able to convince him to stay. The whole evening my dad sat away from my mom and didn't pay attention to her at all. It was time to take a family photo after the celebration. Levi, the eldest son, asked my dad to come a little closer to him. My dad said, "No way I'm doing that." Levi was very upset and ran to the bathroom. My mom exploded at my dad and started screaming. The whole family was angry with my dad, so he packed his things and left. In the morning, my dad came to pick me and Eleanor up. Gabriel saw my dad coming, so he talked to him. My grandfather was at a loss for words and just yelled at his nephew for ruining the whole evening for everyone. My dad replied, "I will not be a new dad for these kids. Whatever you say now, I don't feel guilty for my actions." My grandmother asked me how I felt about my father's words. I told her that I completely agreed with my father. I don't really like the way he expresses himself, but in the end, he should not become a new father for the children for whom my mother left our family. My grandmother was upset by what I said, but I really think that my dad doesn't owe Liga and Isaac anything. It was my mom who left us, so she should bear all the responsibility for the children. Even though my family judges my dad, I supported him. Maybe my dad did something wrong, but he did it very fairly. However, none of our family wants to have anything to do with my dad now. Is that fair to him? My mom thinks her ex is a bastard. She refuses to ever say a word to him. I am really upset about this. Julian, it is very unfortunate that your parents are behaving in such a selfish manner. After all, everyone thinks only of their own comfort. On the one hand, your father should not have helped his ex, but if you think about it, it would have been very nice. I realize that a lot of bad things happened in your family, but no one should have lost their sense of kindness and respect. Yes, your parents divorced and moved on with their lives. Does this mean that we should forget all the good things that happened between them? The last people who should suffer from quarrels between adults are children. Your parents should have realized this and not start playing their own games and involve the children's feelings in it. The appearance of Grayson's children in your life complicates an already delicate situation. It is understandable that you and your sister will have mixed feelings. It is important to communicate and process these emotions in a healthy way, but your parents probably didn't realize that by their actions, they are not doing something bad just for themselves. I will only write the truth, and it is that your parents are two selfish people. Your father's uncle was very right when he started lecturing him. Hannah, your dad should have realized that he is not the only one who has experienced grief. Those children, Levi and Isaac, did not deserve to lose their dad. This is a much harder event to deal with than the loss of a wife or mother. It's pointless to make excuses for your father. People who are in good health can understand the circumstances of others, but your father's pride and resentment simply blinded him. Because of this, you also got this disease and you start thinking that your father is not to blame. But I want to remind you that Levi and Isaac are in some way your relatives too, and not to sympathize with them is a manifestation of the highest folly. You cannot be a person like your father, Lillian, to cope with feelings of pain, resentment, and confusion. Facing these events is not easy. It is clear that you and your sister Eleanor have different ways of dealing with these emotions. However, it is important to recognize your father's point of view. It is also important to recognize that the emotions and needs of Levi and Isaac, your mom's new children, are important. I am truly sorry for all the children in this story. I can recognize your dad as being right in this story, but you have to realize that he is a grown man who does not want to help the woman on whose shoulders he is. Two small sons who were left without a father. It's more than just having two orphans. I hope your dad will start thinking not only about his feelings. Next story. I have 4 children born to different men. My 2 older boys and 2 girls. My eldest son Matteo is 17 years old, and in a few weeks he will turn 18. The youngest daughter I have is Aubrey, who is 6 years old. My 2 sons were born to my first husband Anthony, with whom I lived for 20 years. We married him when we were both 20 years old. We had a child almost as soon as we got married, and it was not the easiest time for us. Neither of us had even finished college. My mom was looking after my child while I was doing my thesis. My relationship with Anthony became unbearable after a long time. We decided to break up, but I initiated it. About 8 months later, I started dating Jackson. In the second year of our relationship, we got married. And 6 months after we got married, I got pregnant. And 2 years later, I gave birth again to a girl, Aubrey, who is my youngest. Because Jackson and I are not so young anymore, it was difficult for us to provide well for all of our children's needs. Not that we were living poorly, but we certainly didn't have a lot of income. We lived in a small apartment that Jackson inherited from her father. It's a cozy apartment 5 minutes from the park, where we often go for walks with the kids. 2 years ago, my husband Jackson received his first disability and could not work at his old job. So Jackson started doing as much housework as he could. He also found another job where the income was half as much, and I was left with the burden of earning money for the whole family. Because my health is a little better than Jackson's, but the money I earned was not enough. My mom and dad helped our family a lot because my girls had to go to school, and every year we had to buy something for them. I don't think I need to explain how expensive it can be. Our family's approximate income per year was about $60,000 a year. I don't know how we would have managed if my parents hadn't helped us. So for the time being, Jackson, the girls, and I were living on the margins, to put it mildly. My husband Anthony received a large inheritance from his grandfather. Anthony studied business, so he knew what to do with the money. In 2 years, Anthony was able to open 3 successful businesses. Selling clothes and appliances, his financial situation became so great that one day my kids told me how they heard their dad's accountant's report. He said that the net profit for the month reached more than $2 million. I was happy that my children had a rich father, but in all the years after the divorce, Anthony helped only 2 boys who were born to him. It was very upsetting for my girls because they lived with me in Jackson, and the 2 older boys lived with their other dad like kings. Anthony only helped out with money a few times, and only after my eldest son asked for it. I don't claim my ex's money. It seems to me that it would be right if Anthony could provide more money for his family, especially at a time when it was very difficult for us. And at that moment, Anthony flew to Hawaii for a vacation. This year, my son is celebrating his 18th birthday. The problem is that Anthony doesn't want Jackson and I to be allowed to attend the party. My ex said he was willing to take care of all the organization and expenses for Matteo's party, and he would even allow Matteo's younger sisters to attend the party as well. I really didn't like Anthony's approach. He wants to use the money to assure his sons that he is better than me or Jackson. He is partially successful because my 2 sons have been living with Anthony for 4 years. Matteo didn't really care if I was going to be at the party or not. Over the years, his dad has been able to assure Matteo that he doesn't really need me. Because of this, I had a fight with Anthony on the phone. I told him that if he forbade me to see my children, I would not see them. I will have to file documents in court, and he will have to answer for everything. Anthony said he didn't care and I could do what I wanted. I called him a bastard with no feelings. My husband tried to support me. I did not forbid my girls to go to their brother's party, but I told them not to listen to a word Anthony said. My sister was teary-eyed when I told her. Anthony has always been a miser and a man who looked for his own advantageous moments. But what he started to do now, it crossed all the lines. After the holiday, my sons don't really want to see me and treat me coldly. Then I found out from Matteo what his dad said during the holiday, that I didn't come to the celebration with Jackson because it wasn't important to us. I was furious with Anthony and ready to kill him. From now on, I don't talk to Anthony under any circumstances. I also tweeted the story and tagged Anthony. My post was viewed by 100,000 people. Anthony's business has suffered some losses, which makes me very happy. My ex-asshole, what an asshole to find. Ellie, your ex probably cares more about his money than he does about other people's lives. If I can consider you strangers to Anthony, your dedication to your family's well-being is admirable. It is unfortunate that your ex-husband, Anthony, he does not provide consistent support to his children, especially during difficult times. It is very important to prioritize the well-being of all your children, regardless of the parents' relationship. I'm sure it was no problem for him to give you a few thousand every month. Because of his resentment, Anthony has deprived other children of well-being. What you wrote on social media about what that asshole did, it was a great decision. Anthony is polite in public and shows what a great dad and businessman he is. But now a lot of people know what the business owner is hiding. I thought it was a stereotype about the greed of the rich, but apparently there is truth to it. Stella, it is obvious that you did everything you could to provide for your children, even in difficult circumstances. I'm sorry to hear that your ex-husband, Anthony, has not made a consistent contribution to the well-being of your children. I could understand his actions if his income was the same as yours. But Anthony earned 20 times more than you. His income was over $2 million. Couldn't Anthony have found a few thousand for his ex, who also takes care of his children? Although your frustration with Anthony's unequal treatment of your children is understandable, resorting to public posts on social media to criticize his business and cause him harm, this may not be the most effective way to resolve this issue. Instead, seek legal advice or mediation to ensure that your children receive the support they deserve, because Anthony has many connections and could do anything with your feelings. I hate it when someone can do whatever they want. Now I want to tell a different story. My friend Luke has a girlfriend whom he has been dating for 3 years. Riley is a very beautiful girl who is known for her exceptional intelligence and love of sports. My friend works seasonal jobs. Most of the time, Luke goes away for a few months and comes back home for 1 month. I have a very good relationship with Riley because I know her before my friend does. A week ago, Luke left for a business trip for 1 month. At that time, Riley was preparing for a competition. Riley injured her spine when she was jumping over the high bar. So for the first few days, Riley was in the hospital being diagnosed. My friend was in a strong cheek, but could not return home immediately. Luke asked me as a man and a friend to come to Riley sometimes. I agreed because I felt incredibly sorry for her. Especially Riley brought me cake when I was sick during my birthday. I went to see Riley several times a week after work. Riley has a sister who was with her most of the time. After a few weeks, my friend's sister said that she could not come to Riley so often anymore. I told Riley that I would be able to spend more time with her because I had finished some important projects at work. Every day I would sit with Riley for several hours and try to cheer her up. We talked a lot about our studying together and how much we had accomplished. In 1 week, I became incredibly close to Riley. I didn't even notice that I was going to her house with incredible pleasure. I was so excited to go home when I knew my dad was going to give me a car. Riley has become more than a friend to me. It started to scare me a little bit because she is the wife of my closest friend. Riley and Luke hadn't been married for a long time. About 3 months ago, they became an official couple. However, this did not serve as an apology for my feelings. I hadn't had anyone close to me for a long time to talk to about all the things I wanted to. Given that Riley was very poorly mobile and had nowhere to go, I could talk to her for hours. I had never thought of Riley as dumb, but after a week of talking to her, I realized that she was a very smart girl. I felt a certain amount of jealousy towards my friend, that his wife was Riley and not mine. This realization started to destroy me every day. I got to the point where I really wanted to go to Riley, but I realized that I was not going to her just to help her. I started to be driven only by my feelings. I had no choice but to take control of the situation. Otherwise, I could have caused Luke and Riley to break up. I didn't want to ruin the life of my friend, who has been like a brother to me for 6 years. A week before, Luke was supposed to return from his business trip. I went to Riley and told her everything. She was very surprised because she thought I was only motivated by good intentions, not feelings. I apologized to Riley and said, I will not have contact with you for a long time, so that my feelings disappear as far as possible. Riley promised that she would not tell anyone about it. I felt much better after that conversation. After Luke arrived, he was very grateful to me for agreeing to spend my own time with his wife. Luke started inviting me to dinner to celebrate his return. By this time, Riley was doing much better and could go to the refrigerator by herself. I kept saying no to my friend because I didn't want to catch the strange feeling of seeing Riley. My friend was very surprised when I said no. Luke said to me, "Man, I don't recognize what's wrong with you. You were always willing to sit with me at home and talk about life." I told him again and again that I had too much to do and couldn't join in. Luke began to ask his wife what I had done and why his friend didn't want to be in the house. Riley almost told her husband everything in an instant. Even after 2 weeks had passed, my friend tried to find out the reasons for my refusal. Once again, Luke asked me about my affairs and I told him. Luke should not try to convince me to come. I have very important things to do. Luke got angry and said, I used to have a friend who was always there for me, and now you have done something and don't want to see your old friend. You know what? I won't even think of calling you again unless you want to tell me everything. Luke has been angry with me for weeks now, but I don't know what to do. If I tell them that I'm in love with his wife, Luke will hate me and I will definitely lose my friend. On the other hand, if I don't tell Luke anything, he'll lose all trust in me. I feel like a jerk because I ruined the lives of people who didn't deserve it. Zoe, look at him, so noble and afraid to tell his friend that he fell in love with his wife and almost destroyed their marriage. Dude, as soon as you realized you had feelings for Riley, you should have stopped going to see her. Let her relatives come and take care of Riley. As a last resort, you could hire a person to stay with Riley all the time. Your friend trusted you a lot, so he knew he could rely on you. The author of this story managed to undermine his friend's trust. This is despite the fact that Luke doesn't even know anything about your feelings for his wife. You almost did something very stupid and selfish. I don't know what motivated you to pull yourself together, but if you didn't, then you're the reason why one more happy person got divorced. Luke would have started cursing you, and you would have lost a great friend who is like a brother to you. Jaden, I am a psychologist by profession and can express my professional opinion. I'm sorry to see that your feelings for Riley, your friend's wife, have caused such a conflict inside you, have caused such a conflict within you. However, it is commendable that you were able to recognize your emotions and take the initiative, distancing yourself from Riley almost as soon as you realized that your feelings were becoming problematic. Your decision to admit your emotions to Riley was an important step because honesty is important between people in a friendship. I can tell you that at the same time, it is very important to consider the ethical and moral consequences of your actions. Developing romantic feelings for your friend's wife is a delicate matter. It can lead to significant damage and destruction of the relationship. Although you have thought of taking steps to distance yourself from Riley, now you have to decide if you are ready to tell your friend Luke the truth about your behavior. It is important to approach this conversation with compassion, understanding, and sincerity. If you eventually decide to share your truth with Luke, you should be prepared for different reactions. Not everyone will be ready to hear this truth. Moreover, I noticed that Luke is very emotional. In conclusion, regardless of the outcome, learn from this experience and strive to make amends. This is the way to become a better person. I would advise you not to tell Luke about what happened between you and Riley right away. With time, things will become easier, and you will most likely keep your friend. My next story. My son Dylan turned 16 on his birthday and asked me to go with him to the salon and have his nose pierced. I'm a little old-fashioned and not used to this kind of look for boys. Moreover, the procedure is not the cheapest, and my son wants a special ring that costs $60. I think it's not very cool to make such serious decisions at this age. Dylan says that all his friends are different in some way. My son told me that his friends even have several tattoos on their bodies. I am strongly opposed to Dylan getting a piercing so young. In a global sense, I don't really care what Dylan wants, but not when he is under my care and under 18. If he was 19 and Dylan came to me asking for advice, of course I wouldn't say I was against the decision. Dylan often reproaches me for the fact that his older sister got a tattoo and I did nothing about it. In fact, my older daughter was turning 18 in 1 month, so I didn't forbid her to get a tattoo. But my son Dylan is very offended and says that I always let his sister do everything and I treat him badly, which of course is not true. I have spoken with Dylan more than once about this topic. I wouldn't mind buying him a new basketball for $300 or buy him a baseball bat with a local star's autograph on it, but I'm totally against dropping $200 on a little nose ring for my son. You can spend a good day with that money. You can even buy something useful with this money. My wife said that we should respect Dylan's feelings at least sometimes, but you know, I don't care that much about spending money on my son's piercing. I care that my son wants to be like his friends, and in fact, Dylan doesn't need to get a piercing. And in addition to my thoughts, I don't like to see my son walking around with a pierced nose, so as long as Dylan is under my parental hand, I will not give him permission to get a piercing. Dylan says, "Dad, you're an evil tyrant who doesn't want to support his son." He tries to reassure me that piercing is the coolest thing for him. Dylan even called his grandmother to get me to give him permission. To my surprise, my mom listened to Dylan and texted me several times to stop acting like a jerk and give Dylan permission to get a piercing. I asked my son, "Do you really think that a piercing will make you more cool?" Dylan said, "I'm pretty sure that getting a piercing will make me look more mature and cool." My son has been insisting that I give my consent for a long time. I even had a fight with Dylan when he gave me an ultimatum. He learned this from my dad. Dylan said, "Dad, if you don't give me the money, I'm going to take the money I get for my birthday and get a piercing, whether you like it or not." Even though my son said that, I was totally against it. I told him, "If you do that, you'll lose your laptop for a few months." Dylan started saying that I was out of line and was very angry with him. And again, Dylan started using his older sister as an example, but he doesn't notice that his older sister never argued with me and always reacted calmly to everything. Dylan's behavior sometimes became inappropriate. As a result, my son got a piercing after his birthday and has been mournfully unresponsive to me. I softened Dylan's punishment a bit by taking away his laptop for just 1 month. He is very unhappy that I punished him, but what else could I do? Dylan is my boy, who is only 16 years old. He has to respect his father's decision. I don't think Dylan is old enough to get a piercing. After all, Dylan could have chosen anything for a present other than a tattoo or a piercing. My wife is a little angry with me for being very cruel to my son. Dylan only communicates with his mom now. I'm sorry that it happened this way, but I'm not going to give my son total freedom. People will write in the comments that I am an asshole who is stuck in the nitties, and I'm sure all of these people will be right. Maybe someone will give me some advice on parenting. Nora, you were too harsh on your son. I realize that Dylan is still young to you, but you could have been more lenient with him. Dylan's ultimatum is nothing more than a way of expressing his frustration and desire to be able to make decisions for himself. Instead of resorting to punishment, a more balanced approach should have been taken. I'm sure we could have discussed things in a more relaxed atmosphere. Moreover, I have heard that there are special staples that do not require a nose to be pierced, but it will look like the nose is pierced. If you wanted to solve the situation, not just show yourself to be more important, then you would come up with a solution. Maybe you didn't know, but I'll tell you this. Parenting is a delicate balance between controlling your child and giving them space to develop. By your actions, you simply alienated your son and gave him a reason to despise you. Lily, as a mother of a teenage girl, I understand your situation very well. You have a more traditional view of certain types of appearance. Having an open discussion about your concerns with Dylan and actively listening to his reasons could help you to be more understanding. Why he wants to get a nose piercing could have facilitated a more productive dialogue. Your son may not feel very attractive. Because of this, Dylan thinks that getting a piercing will help him. Your use of punishment and ultimatums is very negative for your son. Your son often compares himself to his sister. Dylan may be very resentful of her for some reason. You, as a father, should be a beacon for your son, not a dampener of his aspirations. Personally, I don't mind piercings or tattoos, but I support the idea that children should listen to their parents in such matters, especially when they are under the age of majority. I can give you some very good advice. Try to find a middle ground that respects your values and Dylan's desire for self-expression. Having empathetic conversations, expressing your concerns without dismissing his feelings, and being willing to compromise can help rebuild trust and connection between you and your son. It helped me a lot in my time, and I hope it will help you too. A story that really surprised me. I am now 36 years old and live with my wife who hates pets. In fact, my wife is allergic to animal hair. Natalie does not have a strong problem with this, but sometimes she can get really sick because of the hair, and she gets skin irritation and can cough for a long time. Because of this, we discouraged our son from getting a cat when he was 12 years old. Personally, Natalie and I love animals, but because of my wife's problems, we didn't dare to get an animal. Even when we go to someone's house and there is an animal there, we ask them to put it in another room. My uncle is a dog lover, and when we go to see him, he has to send his dog to the second floor, and the house stands with the windows open for 3 hours. Also, that Natalie could sit quietly while visiting. I have a cousin who is 22 years old and was kicked out of his dorm because of his behavior. Lincoln asked me to let him stay with me. There is a small room in my house that used to be for things. For a guy who had to live alone, that room was perfect. I talked to Natalie and we agreed to let Lincoln live with us. 5 days after Lincoln started living in my house, he was gone. My wife started coughing from time to time. We thought it was her body's need, so we didn't pay attention. Another week passed and my wife started to get red spots on her body. It became clear to me that there was a source of wool in the house. I asked my cousin, "Did you come here alone by any chance?" Lincoln said, "Of course I did. Have you seen any girls come to me?" I asked him a more specific question. "Do you have an animal with you?" Lincoln said, "I brought a small hamster with me." I took hold of my head and started telling him, that he shouldn't have brought an animal with him in any case. For all the commenters, my cousin was well aware of my wife's problems. Lincoln hoped that Natalie would not be able to react to the small animal in any way, but his plan was a failure. I told him to get the hamster out of my house immediately. After all, Natalie hasn't been feeling well for several days. I was beginning to think she was sick, but my cousin stood his ground and began to defend his animal. I continued to insist that he take the hamster away. I kept it a secret from my wife for a few days that Lincoln was living with us and the animal. My cousin had a few days to resolve the issue with the animal, but Lincoln didn't even try to do anything, so I told my wife everything. Natalie mostly behaves calmly and doesn't get annoyed for no reason, but this time she became very angry and went into my cousin's room. Natalie yelled at Lincoln and told him to get the damn hamster out of our house. Otherwise, he and the hamster would sleep on the street. Lincoln was very upset and said that we were being too rude to a defenseless animal. I explained to him that he lives in my house and there are certain rules that need to be followed. Lincoln stayed with us for 2 more days and then went to live with his friend. Lincoln complained to his friend about me for not protecting nature and not giving a damn about animals. Some of my friends asked me if I really hated animals. Lincoln made our family look insensitive and rude. Maybe my wife and I were a little rude to Lincoln, but he knew my living conditions very well, and he broke those rules anyway. I feel a little bad telling people that I kicked my cousin out because of a hamster, but it's the truth. I feel a little disgusted. My wife said it was Lincoln's fault because he didn't want to remove the hamster. Zoe, it is very unfortunate that your cousin Lincoln did not respect your family's situation and brought the hamster into your home without regard for your wife's well-being. Moreover, it was not a simple whim on your wife's part. It was about your wife's specific health, and your cousin's attempt to keep the animal a secret is not a good solution. Even if Lincoln had warned you or your wife that he wanted to live with a hamster, you simply wouldn't let him live with you. But it's brazen to bring an animal into someone else's home without warning. That's a very negative thing for Lincoln to do. In fact, you were very kind to him. My husband immediately kicked his relative out for such an act, not even letting him pack his things. Joshua, to deal with delicate situations like allergies and health problems in the family, it can be incredibly difficult. It's clear that you and your wife have made sacrifices, and you have adapted to ensure her well-being, especially with regard to pets and animals. I'm sorry that your cousin Lincoln brought a hamster into your home without taking into account your wife's allergies and your living conditions. I am very curious how long Lincoln was supposed to stay with you. This answer determines how long Lincoln wanted to hide the animal from you. If after a few weeks your wife felt uncomfortable and the allergy started to take its toll, so what could have happened? If Lincoln had been living with you for a month, it couldn't have been a secret for long. Sooner or later, you would have discovered Lincoln's abnormalities. Then he could be punished more seriously. You even denied your children pets. Does Lincoln think that his feelings are more valuable to you than the feelings of your own children? Your cousin's behavior is very stupid, and you and your wife have nothing to apologize for. You apologize when you are guilty, not when they secretly bring hamsters into your house. So let Lincoln cry to someone else that you are very rude.